To help us break down everything we need to know is David Wharton, feature sports writer at the LA Times, who is live for us today in Tokyo. David, great to have you on. So what are some of the big moments that you saw today?
Well, today actually was a big moment. That was a disappointment for Japan, but was Naomi Osaka losing early in tennis. And that's a big deal in this country. She's a huge star. As you go around the city, you see her on billboards and buildings all over the place. So that was kind of one of the real big moments. We've got Katie Ledecky coming up tomorrow for the U.S. fans, and that's going to be a big deal.
With Naomi Osaka, it was pretty surprising. What do you attribute it to? Straight sets. She said she was happy with her performance, but it was a lot of pressure. Was it perhaps just too much pressure, or did her opponent just play really well?
It looked like pressure. She looked lackluster. She didn't look like she had the bounce and the movement that we usually see from her. So I just was thinking the whole time that she looked like someone who was kind of worn down and was not anywhere near her best.
We saw the Philippines win their first ever gold medal in women's weightlifting. How big of a moment was that for that country?
That's a great thing about the Olympics is every once in a while you get this situation where a smaller country that doesn't have that athletic background all of a sudden gets a gold medal or gets on the podium. And that's one of the things that I love most about the Olympics is to see moments like that.
There was a bunch of new sports this year, and I was looking at your Twitter feed, and you tweeted about women's street skateboarding. The average age on the podium, 14 and a half years old, the youngest in Olympic history. You know, one of the goals of adding these new sports was to appeal to the youth. So does it look like that's working?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We'll know better when we see, sort of what the viewership numbers are, especially on non-traditional platforms. Are the kids streaming some of these competitions? Are they watching them in different ways than maybe their parents would have? But I was out also at the street skateboarding the day before for men, where you had, Nigel Houston, who's kind of a legend in that sport, and he didn't do very well. But there were some great performances by some other athletes, including the Japanese star who won the gold. And this is what the International Olympic Committee wants. They want sports that kids are going to watch and that are going to turn kids into Olympic fans, because their viewership has been getting steadily older and older for a long time now, and they need to bring in a new generation.
And Hawaii's Carissa Moore, she took home the gold in the first ever surfing competition for women. How was that?
The conditions weren't great out there. We caught the edge of a typhoon here in Tokyo. So the water was pretty stormy. It was one of those days where it's not really how well you rode the wave. It was how many waves you were actually able to catch, because in the stormy mess, there wasn't much out there. But she did really well. I mean, she scored over a 10, which I think was one of the highest combined scores of the day. And she just did great. And then we also had Carolyn Marks, who just barely missed out on a bronze. So it was a good day for the American women on the surfing.
What about the American women in soccer? They had a tie against Australia. How is this team looking right now?
Not great. Not what we're used to seeing. They look shaky. And people thought, well, maybe after that initial loss to Sweden in the very first game, maybe they would get motivated. They talked about getting pumped up and getting angry about that. But we haven't seen a huge improvement. If there hadn't have been 2 own goals against New Zealand in their second game, they might have actually been in some trouble. I mean, they'll advance now, but they better find another gear, or they're not going to last real long when we get to knockout.
And just in general, curious what the mood is like on the ground there, because this clearly is an Olympics like no other, under the cloud of COVID, a lot of controversy. How are the athletes doing? Are they still really just excited to be there, despite the fact that their family not there to cheer them on and no fans?
Well, I think there's 2 parts. I mean, first of all, they train for years and years for this. And most of these Olympic athletes, they're only going to have 1 or 2 Olympics in their career. So they can't afford to let one pass by. So, yeah, they're very happy to be here and they're competing very hard. But as I was telling someone earlier today, these feel kind of like an Olympics in a laboratory. They're very sterile. You don't have those moments where the crowd is going crazy and that pumps athletes up. And that's when you see the really special moments, and we don't have that here. We have good, hard competition, but it feels different, and without the fans and without all that noise, I think that's what you're going to get for the next, for the rest of the 2 weeks.
That's such an interesting way to put it. Just seeing over Twitter, breaking as we speak, Simone Biles out of team competition for Team USA. She'll be in the individual competition on Thursday. That's from NBC. Not to just kind of lay that on you now, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's amazing. But listen, we're going to be walking this tightrope in Tokyo all the way through the end of the Olympics, where we've had all sorts of big stars pull out of events. We're going to have people pulled out because of COVID matters, and it's the biggest fear of the IOC is to lose an entire competition, an entire event to COVID. But that's the risk that we're going to be facing every day. And I'm not saying I don't know what the situation is with Simone Biles, but we're going to be looking at things like that for the next 2 weeks.
All right, David Wharton, feature sports writer at the Los Angeles Times, live in Tokyo. Such great reporting. Thank you so much for joining us.